Driving this, did you have PTSD? You know what PTSD stands for? Post-traumatic stress about differentials. It was good. I've been holding that one in the whole drive over here. Whatever you want to say.
Okay, whatever I want.
Just don't overthink it.
Yep.
Don't overthink it.
That's when you lose yourself.
That's true. Bro, I'll tell you what, I lost myself in the sauce in San Diego. I shot the rear seat section 4 times because I kept up.
That's unlike
Don't overthink it.
In a rear seat?
Don't overthink it. In a rear seat. Ain't shit to talk about in the rear seat.
No,
and
really.
yet, here we are. Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt.
And my name is Paulo, and we just spent a week with the facelifted Genesis GV70 V6.
And I'm going to walk you through the 15 things that you need to know about it, and we're going to talk a little bit about how it competes against rivals like the BMW X3 M50, Audi's SQ5 that we were recently in, Porsche Macan GTSs that we've been in the past, and we'll talk about some of those things.
Yeah, and then we'll get behind the wheel, talk about the standouts for the week and how it stacks up to some of those competitors Matt just mentioned. Let's get into it.
And before we talk about the main event, let's zoom in and talk about some of the funky little odds and ends. Like for one, we don't usually talk about the key, but when it's this cool and this pearlescent, yeah, we're gonna talk about this. This is possibly the coolest key I've ever seen. And on your top sport prestige trim, you can use your phone as a key. And your gauge cluster screen corresponds with the weather. It's kind of hard to see now, but you can see it's almost like a mountainscape, and it's a little bit sunny, almost sunset, which is not quite accurate, but when they dropped this thing off, it was raining earlier, and the climate screen did in fact have lightning bolts and some raindrops in there. And this Bang & Olufsen 16 speaker audio system is pretty awesome. And speaking of sound, you've got these little microphones all through the cabin. You can see it says acoustic control, and that's because you have active noise cancellation here in the cabin. So these are picking up the ambient tone in the cabin and playing reverse sound waves to cancel the noise from the road. And just like you'd see up in the grill and other places throughout the cabin, you have this graduating diamond pattern even on your pedals. And if you want a custom set a driver profile to your fingerprint, you can do that here. And you've got glass controls like you'd see in some high-end BMWs here in your Genesis GV70. And I like that in this little climate screen here, we can control things that are going on in the rear, including the rear heated seats, temperature, and some fan orientation and things like that. And it doesn't stop there. I can also control what the passenger is doing. This is kind of a Genesis staple. I can move them forward and backward, and I can even recline them. And down here you see you have your drive select toggle. If you push it in, you go to terrain modes, and then you got snow, mud, and sand. Interesting in something like a performance-oriented thing like this. But if you go back over to drive, then you've got eco, comfort, sport, and sport plus. And when you really zoom in on the tack and the speedo, it's like a flaming Sith Lord lightsaber. And down here in your menu, you have terrain mode. Again, the off-road oriented stuff in something like this V6 G70 or GV70 is pretty funny, but it's actually really cool. We've got steering angle, as we can see. We've got traction and power and torque distribution. We've got latitude, longitude, and our elevation, and pitch and roll. This is pretty sweet and a pretty robust, I guess, information display on something that's not oriented to be an off-roader. But something you might find yourself using a little bit more is quiet mode. Presumably, you've got kids or family in the back, and if some or all of them fall asleep, you can enter quiet mode, which is going to dull some of the speakers and sound in the back to make it easier for them to sleep back there. And from quiet mode, we'll go over to climate control. Well, this screen I think is just interesting because you've got basically a jet turbine from an airplane, but for some reason that corresponds to climate controls. I get what they're trying to do. It's supposed to look like a fan, but it's very clearly a jet turbine from an airplane. And then from there, you can even leave yourself voice memos. If you want to remember to do something after work or whatever, you can leave yourself a voice memo and the car will remind you. And the last little thing in the screen, I promise, is this 3D setup menu, which is really, really cool. Instead of having to go to a sub-menu listed with lights and doors and tailgate, you can go into this screen. It's really quick and responsive. And then from here, you can select different things. If I want to go to an inside control, and then if I want to adjust things like the cluster, it's easy to select it here rather than having to scroll through pages and pages and pages of head-up display, cluster, vehicle settings, climate. You can actually click stuff where it makes sense visually. I like this touch quite a bit. Hey guys, real quick, Matt here. Just wanted to say I hope you've been enjoying the video. If you have, would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe button. I know it doesn't seem like a big deal, but it does go a long way in helping us get access to cars sooner and get access to manufacturer engineers so we can get more information on the cars and get you more information so you can make better decisions. So would really appreciate you hitting that subscribe, like, comment, the whole YouTube thing. But with that, let's get back to the video. All right, so with all those odds and ends covered, let's zoom back out and start back up at the top. Now, what is the GV70 and what does it compete against? Well, this is Genesis's compact luxury SUV. It's smaller than their GV80. It's kind of their entry-level SUV if you don't count the GV60, which is their electric-only offering. And it competes in a pretty hot segment. Things like the BMW X3, the GLC from Mercedes, the Q5 from Audi, and even kind of the NX from Lexus, and even the Acura RDX. And I guess the Porsche Macan all kind of compete against this GV70. So then what you might be wondering is what's new for this year? Well, this is actually a facelift year for the GV70. It gets minor styling refreshes. Obviously the wheels are new. We'll talk more about that. And some of the tech on the inside is new. And again, we'll get into all that in more detail as we go. But then we'll jump under the hood to talk about powertrains. Now, as standard, you'll get a 2.5 turbocharged four-cylinder. It makes 300 horsepower and 311 pound-feet of torque. I did mention that the GV60 could be construed as the entry-level Genesis SUV, but that's fully electric. And if you wanted something that looked more conventionally SUV like this GV70, there will be a GV70 electrified for this facelift version coming a little bit later. We've had that for the last few years, and I've had it go in it, and it was actually really, really good. But here what we have is the internal combustion performance variant. This is the 3.5 twin-turbo V6. There's no mild hybrid, so it actually is very similar to the Audi SQ5 that we were just in. But here it makes 375 horsepower, 391 pound-feet of torque, and does 0 to 60 in about 5.5 seconds. It is a little bit thirsty compared to some of its German rivals. It's estimated at about 21 mpg combined by the EPA. Our Lakeshore Loop, which does tend to flatter cars, came back with 26.7 mpg, and in the real world, after just about 500 miles of driving this week, we've averaged 24 or 24.2 basically on the nose. But from there, the power goes from that twin-turbo V6 through an 8-speed automatic transmission. It can be a little clunky when it's cold, but as it warms up, it smooths out quite a bit. And here, for our V6 at least, you get all-wheel drive as standard. Let's talk a little bit about how this drives. Those are shifts. Those shifts are not invisible, which I appreciate. Now, starting with the powertrain, we talked about this twin-turbo V6. It does generate a little bit more vibration and is less smooth than something like a B58 straight 6 in the BMW, in the X3. It's not so much of a con or a complaint as it is a statement on the unique personality of the car. It's just a little bit more vibration. It's got a unique sound to it. Some of it is synthesized, but I like it. I've got plenty of power, I've got plenty of torque, and it feels exciting. We've got this transmission that gets a little bit flamboyant with shifts. It's not quite as smooth at lower speeds, or when it's cold, I should say. But when I do want to hustle this hard, I like having a little bit of kick from the gear change. And I like that. Steering, chassis control, really pretty good. Now the steering in Paulo's G70 was fabulous. This is good, but his G70 was fabulous. Now, the V6, I will say, does get a rear LSD. We've also got retuned adaptive dampers for this. It's also got the road preview for the V6. So when you dial it down into comfort or in eco, it's using the front camera to read the road and pre-tension and loosen up the suspension. The spring rates and the sway bars have been updated. And we talked about that active noise cancellation up here. So when you're not on it and you're not pushing it, which is rewarding and fun, by the way, it really settles down. We talked about this in the SQ5 the other week, that car does a great job at just being an Audi. This is the same thing. This just becomes a luxury car so much better than the X3 M50 becomes just a BMW, or the GLC 43 becomes just a Mercedes. This has a genuinely quiet and really refined ride and a very supple personality and tune to the suspension. The ride is great, the cabin isolation is awesome, the seat is a little bit high, but the visibility is epic, and I really don't have anything to complain about. It's a good thing to drive, that's for sure. And when it comes to styling, I know this is a subjective thing, but I do think this GV70 is possibly the most handsome in the class. Now up front, we're looking at a dual basket weave grille with some of the dark or Vader chrome, which looks kind of menacing, especially here with the V6 big power variant. But for this year, we do have a revised lower fascia. We do have some updated headlights. It's their MLA design, and they've been fantastic. Around the side, you can have as little as 19-inch wheels, or you can go all the way up to the 21-inch wheels that we have. These are also packing 14-inch black painted brakes for our V6 trim, and they are fantastic wheels hiding those brakes. They're kind of a gunmetal finish with the dual bar Genesis signature, and that gunmetal paint has some metallic flake in it, so it looks fantastic in midday sunlight. You've got gloss wheel arches, nice, and you've got a handsome swoopy profile as you zoom out. You've got a funky detail for your C-pillar or D-pillar in the rear window basically, and the tail lights, they match the headlights in terms of design. The rear design is a little bit redone with a new exhaust and a new and updated rear bumper, and I just have to say, I do like the way that this GV70 looks. It looks sleek, it looks modern, and it looks aggressive. Leave it down in the comments what you think. But then something a little bit less subjective, we'll talk about cargo space. Now the trunk release is this hidden thing in your rear wiper like you'd see on a Porsche Macan. I do like that. It gets a little bit less dirty in the winter, and it just kind of cleans up the rear design. Now you do have a separate button for close and lock. You guys know I love to see that. And when we look at our space, we're looking at about 29 cubic feet of space. There's a tiny little bit of storage underneath here, but you do have a temporary spare tire under here. A very nice thing to have, and something that not everyone is bringing anymore. You do have the ability to fold the rear seats from the trunk, so you don't have to reach forward ungracefully and fold down the rear seats. You've got a 12-volt outlet, and your LEDs, I hope you can see this, have kind of the basket weave kind of Genesis design. Hold on, I'm going to adjust the camera so you can see the detailing in the lights. That's that same basket weave that we talked about on the pedals and throughout the cabin. When you do fold down the rear seats, you are looking at about 57 cubic feet of space. It's not the biggest ever, but it's still big enough to be pretty practical. We took this thing up to the lake this past weekend and loaded it full of paddle boards and suitcases and coolers and all sorts of stuff, so definitely a nice little cargo area here in the GV70. And it's not just a pretty face, this Genesis, it also has some muscle to back it up, and your towing capacity then is about 3,500 pounds for the max. That's pretty good. And before we head into the cabin, I do want to take a minute to appreciate this Ceres blue paint. I don't think I mentioned it earlier, but I really like the way that this paint catches the light. I will say, I want to give Genesis credit for bringing interesting specs. The last GV70 that we drove was like a matte plum, which looks spectacular. And they have another interesting spec here on the interior, which I'll show you in a second here. But we'll take a look at the door. Oops, forgot to do my 90-degree test. It doesn't open quite 90 degrees, but fairly close. Now, what you'll see on the interior here that I'm talking about is the upper portion of the door card that is black leather with orange stitch. Down here is like a midnight blue leather with orange stitch, and it looks really cool. And it does go throughout the cabin. Look at this seat with the diamond quilting and the orange stitching and the orange, bright orange, or you could even think of it as magma seat belts. But back on the door, you do have manual window shade, which is really nice. These seats obviously recline a little bit. They don't slide like in the Audi SQ5, but they do recline a little bit. And I'll step in at 6'1", and I've got several inches of knee room in front of me. I've got 1.5 inches, 2 inches of headroom above me, even with the panoramic roof, which is standard for advanced trims, I believe, and up. So we've got it here. It's really nice. And down below, we do have climate vents. We have a third climate zone and 3-level heated seats for our outboard seats. Not that we're going to need it today. It's almost 90 degrees. But we also have dual USB-Cs and a household outlet and our center console or center cup holder area with armrest. Really pretty nice. It's not the biggest rear seat that I've ever been in, but as you can see, still big enough for me at 6'1", and I can control more or less legroom as long as the passenger is okay with that. And as we head up the cabin and talk about the front seats, there's actually several things to talk about, starting with the seats themselves. Obviously the same midnight blue interior with the diamond quilting and the contrasted orange stitching, same orange seat belts up front. These seats are really pretty comfortable. We do have this little dial here which controls some bolstering, so I can add in more or less hugging if I want. Also, depending on what drive mode, that works in tandem with this. And you see this button here. This is your ergo motion, or your kind of mild massage. It is only for the driver, not for the passenger, but it's pretty nice, and it's a nice little shortcut button that we have here. Now these seats, they're 3-level heated, they're 3-level cooled, and you got 2-person memory down here. And the steering wheel, the same midnight blue leather, which is fantastic, with the orange stitching. This is a heated steering wheel as well. The only minor complaint that I have is I wish the seat here on the driver's position got about 1 inch lower. Still feel like I'm sitting a little bit high. It caught me out for the first day. I got used to it, but if I could be 1 inch lower, it would be perfect. And then as we touch on the overarching cabin as a whole, we've touched on this quite a bit already, but I do again want to give a shout out to Genesis for bringing interesting colors and specs. This blue interior and the orange accents is fantastic. Everyone that's seen it or gotten in this car has loved it. Now the orange accents, I should have mentioned, are only for the V6 Sport that we have here. But overall, the design and materials are really, really nice. The leather quality is fantastic and everything feels expensive and well screwed together. You have those glass or kind of crystal-esque controls for your center screen as well as your gear selector. And I have to say, from a high level, this is the coolest interior in the class. At a time where the BMWs and the Audis seem to be getting cheaper or choosing screens and kind of less interesting materials, this still feels proper luxury car in here. Now you do have a separate climate control screen, but everything is always there and easy to use. It's just not a physical button, so I think it still makes sense and gets a pass. Again, it feels the most luxury in the class, I would say. Certainly more than the new X3, probably more than a GLC. There's less creaks and rattles than in a GLC, and the Audi SQ5 that we were just in felt kind of blah. It's just black, and if you don't go for the top sport prestige trim in that Audi, you just get a big gloss black tab over on the passenger side of the screen. But when I say that this is the nicest in the class, even your airbag tag is full genuine leather. It's just a nice cabin, is the point. And as we talk about technology, we've already covered some of the odds and ends and some of the littler details in your center screen, but from a high level, here's what we've got. We've got a full color robust head-up display. It gives you loads of information and it works really well in tandem with your HDA system. This is your driver assist system, your adaptive cruise, your lane keep. It works pretty well. You do have the eyeball watcher here, so you don't necessarily need to leave your hand on the wheel, but it will automatically change lanes for you when you hit your turn signal. Now, if you don't provide any resistance, it will adjust pretty quickly and pretty aggressively. So I've found it's nice to leave a little bit of resistance in the steering wheel, which is fine because it wants you to leave your hand on the steering wheel anyway when you're changing lanes. It works pretty well. You do have the blind spot cameras, as you can see, for both sides. A Hyundai Kia Genesis staple, which you love to see. But from there, what we have been staring at is a full 27-inch OLED screen. First is your gauge cluster. We talked about this earlier. Loads of customization, and it even corresponds to the weather, which is just a nice little touch. It looks great, modern. Over here, you do have your center screen. This is your main event, your infotainment screen. You can control it down here with your crystalline shifter or crystalline dial, or it functions as a touchscreen. It's quick, it's snappy, I got no problems with the technology here. You get wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, you get over-the-air updates, and you throw it into reverse, you've got great 360 cameras. I would expect this from Genesis because the Hyundai brand and the Kia brand also have really, really nice 360 cameras. You've got your kind of augmented reality view as you'd expect, and it's really pretty nice. So overall, nice modern technology suite, every feature I could want, and wrapped in a really nice and attractive looking package. And the last thing that we'll talk about before we get back with Paulo and go for a bit of a drive is the price. Now a GV70 starts at $48,000. If you want a V6, you'll go up to your Sport Advance. That starts at $63,500, but here, our Sport Prestige V6 starts at about $70,000. So it's a good bit of money, but it's also pretty competitive with some segment benchmarks. So let's talk a little bit more about that with Paulo, who coincidentally owns an X3 M40.
I like this little crystal dial. Ah, f***s with you.
I f*** with that, I f*** with this, I f*** with that, I f*** with this, I f*** with this. I f*** with that, I f*** with this, I f*** with this, and this.
Basically the
whole minus the clunky shifts and minus its thirst. It's as thirsty as me in college, I'll tell you what.
All right. Whoa. A lot of power.
There's good power. I like the little like flaming lightsaber thing in the tag.
Yeah, that you got there.
There's certainly some added sound being pumped in, but I really like this thing. But I want you to talk about your pros and cons, and obviously you have a BMW X3 M40 and how that compares. So
yeah,
just get into it.
Yeah, dude.
Just let them have it.
The meat and potatoes, as I say. I'm gonna dial this back. Just
so we can hear ourselves.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they did a really nice job. So redesigned the interior. A lot of good things going on from like the materials that they used, the design elements, like your HVAC controls down here. This is awesome. You got this 27-inch, I think it's an OLED. The D steering wheel, like I think it punches above its weight class in terms of interior styling, materials, experience.
100%. This is the thing with the new X3 M50 and the new SQ5 that I was just in the other week. This certainly feels another step toward luxury when those German rivals have taken a step back from luxury towards economy. They've filled the interior with more scratchy, cheap plastics. Nothing's interesting going on here. You can get really interesting specs. The Genesis GV70 that we drove a couple years ago in Chicago, really interesting like matte plum paint.
Yeah.
And then this with its like midnight blue interior with the orange personality.
Yep.
You're getting personality here in the Genesis that you're not going to get from Germany. And I love that.
Yeah.
And it's quality too.
Really good. Yeah, and I think exterior-wise, like it looks really good. Love the headlights, the taillights, the design is just really good. The wheels are great.
I love these wheels.
They're really good.
So cool.
Driver assist features that they have here is excellent.
Yeah.
I'd say top 3 at least, top 3 to 5. Like it's proper good here.
Yep.
Just a simple thing like the blind spot cameras that you have on either side, like that to me should be in every car. We've obviously had cars that have had it in the past, other Hyundais, Kias, and Genesis, but actually no, this is like our first Genesis.
This is our first Genesis. So thank you,
other Kias and Hyundais, but it was like the one feature recently that I gone back and driven my car and my wife's car where I'm like, that was such a nice feature, so you don't necessarily always need to constantly be turning your head and looking in your blind spot. You can trust the camera, which is really great.
Sometimes I sleep really wrong on my neck, and it hurts to do this.
Exactly.
So that's a nice feature.
We're like getting older.
I'm
and
getting
stuff too.
old.
Yeah. Trying to think what else. Oh yeah, so they also revised like the suspension. I'm sure you mentioned it in the video.
Yep.
But I think they did a really nice job there. The adaptive suspension is really good. Like you can really feel it when you put it in sport mode. It really does a nice job of stiffening up. I think it's really refined in here from like a noise isolation perspective.
Yeah, these little acoustic isolator things.
Again, I just think like this cabin is just a really good place to be. The seats are extremely comfortable.
Yeah.
Like it's good. It's really good.
It's very good. I totally agree. Yeah, I think they do a great job in balancing the damping profile. So in Sport Plus, it is firm, it is disciplined, it is dynamic. And then down in Comfort and Eco mode, it really adds in some more compression, some more rebound, and it like really softens up the ride to a more noticeable degree than you would get, again, in the BMW, in the Mercedes, the GLC 43, and things like that. So it does a great job.
Yeah, and then I think on the like the negative con side, I think the only thing I'd really call out is I owned a Genesis, we've mentioned it. I had a G70, and when I was on the forums and Facebook groups and all that sort of thing, I think the biggest thing that people had issues with was dealership experience because they've expanded so rapidly. You know, they're trying to get their footing. Yeah. I personally never had a bad experience in Wisconsin with the different dealerships that I took it to. But I'd encourage you, if you're considering to getting a Genesis, that you do some research around the dealerships that you would potentially take it to get serviced and that sort of thing, just to get a sense of what people think of them.
Yeah, I remember you saying that you had a good experience. They like came, picked up your car, took it to the Genesis dealer. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was really good. So that's like the one thing I think I'd say. And then the other thing I'd say, like, I think this does a nice job of blending the gap between like a Lexus in terms of the material, the comfort, and experience versus, and in between that and a BMW from like a sport enthusiast perspective, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think my final thoughts just from a high level are I'm really impressed with this thing.
Yeah.
Like just full stop. There are other cars that do things better, but I think this is a fantastic jack of all trades. A Macan is going to be more performance oriented, but it's Porsche money. A BMW is going to be a little bit more money and have a smoother powertrain, but this certainly has a nicer interior. The Audi has more dynamic shifts with its DCT, but this is a nicer interior once again. Same thing with the Benz. This is just a nicer interior. The materials, the build quality, there's no squeaks and rattles. If I push on the screen or the center console, it doesn't creak like you get in some of the Mercedes. So it's also bigger than a Lexus NX. That's technically, I guess, maybe a competitor to this, but not with this powertrain. But I guess my point is, it's very good.
Yeah.
So thank you to Genesis for letting us have a go. This is our first loan, so thank you to Amanda and the Genesis team for letting us have a go. Thank you to you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.
Bye, guys.